So this is a story I've never told before, and I've no idea how long it lasts. And it's got nothing to do with the show that I'm doing, which is, by the way, called Libertarian Love Songs, and it's 5:10 in the Banshee Labyrinth over the road. And it's a full live band, and it's absolutely brilliant. So, I'm 49, and when I was a young man in the early 1990s, I read a book called A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving. Has anyone read that book? Yeah, a couple of you. Okay. So the basic sort of story of the book is that there's this odd eccentric chap called Owen Meany, who's very short, and he spends all through the book, he spends his whole life practicing doing basketball hoops, throwing things into a basketball, and he's the most sort of, he's not athletic, but he constantly is picking up basketballs and throwing them in this hoop. And you never quite understand why he does it. And then the very climax of the book is that he ends up saving a load of kids. There's a fire, and he has to get these kids up from the ground and through the fire escape. There's a chute that he can get the kids out of, and that's the reason that he does this thing all the way through the book. And the message of the book is basically, everything happens for a reason. Okay, so I've got that in my head. And in the early 1990s, I went to university and then I went to drama school. And so I'd had quite a lot of further education, but all I really wanted to do was go around the world and travel, backpack all the way around the world. But I thought, I'd been at university, I'd been a student for too long, and it was time to start taking life seriously. And so I did a deal with myself, whereby on Boxing Day, every year, when work was quiet, I would book a flight somewhere in the world, and I would go for the whole of January, and I'd come back at the end of January, and then the rest of the year I would work. And I went to all sorts of fantastic places, and I fell madly in love with South America, Colombia in particular. And one of the greatest things about traveling in South America is the music is just everywhere. Salsa and all the various other forms, but particularly salsa. And I just became, you just get on a bus and there's music playing, and it just gets you. And I just became obsessed with salsa. And every time I hear that particular beat, something happens, and I just, it just takes me over. And I started dancing salsa like mad and got really, really good at it for a white guy. And, and I was going in for competitions and stuff like that. I was doing all these great little moves. And this was in London, I was doing it, as well as in South America. And then I'd go out to somewhere in South America and just spend the whole holiday dancing. And I just became obsessed with it. Park that. Now, I was a young sort of actor, performer at the time, but when you're a young man, some doors open up to you and other doors don't open up to you, and often there's no rhyme or reason to it. But I got a lot of work very quickly doing voiceovers, and I never got that much acting work, but I'd get a few jobs, but voiceovers were really well paid and you were really well looked after. And I've been the voice, I must have narrated, 1,000 documentaries over the years, and I'm the voice of, Werther's Original, how about that? Each one lovingly made in gold. Harpic, like a new loo every time. Anyway, so I was doing quite well, and I got this audition to go and I'm part Italian, and so I always used to get auditions for when they needed an Italian. And I got this audition for this film directed by Richard Attenborough, starring Sandra Bullock and Chris O'Donnell. And Sandra Bullock was like the hottest young actress at the time. This was before she started to look like Michael Jackson. And Chris O'Donnell was like Robin in Batman. He was one of the hottest young Hollywood stars. So it was a real A-team. Richard Attenborough, Sandra Bullock. It was called In Love and War, and it was all about Hemingway's life in Italy during World War I. And the scene that I was auditioning for was Heavy Set Soldier 1. What happened in the scene is I was an Italian soldier in the trenches. I had my arm blown off. And Sandra Bullock is talking, and all she says is, all Italian men care about is their mama. And then you cut to Heavy Set Soldier 1 in the trenches. His arm gets blown off, and he screams, "Mama!" like this. And so we went to the audition. It was at Shepperton, and Shepperton's a bit of a maze, and I got lost. I remember seeing this old boy, and I sort of thought, he looks like he knows where he's going. Can you tell me where Studio 4 is, please? And he said, yes, it's over there. And I remember walking away going, fuck, that was Richard Attenborough. So that was one of those. Anyway, we had this audition, and he didn't have a lot of time, and he was a bit of a, he gives this veneer, by the way, of being this real sort of gentle old man of the theatre. He's actually a bit of a little Hitler. He's quite a little tyrant on the set, but anyway, that's by the by. Anyway, we had this audition, and each of the 5 actors who were auditioning for this part, each stood in a row, one here, one here, one here, and Richard Attenborough walked up the row, and he went, "I want you each to shout mama." And I was at the end of the row, and the first guy just went, "Mama!" And the next guy kind of went, "Mama!" And it just got bigger and bigger. So by the time it got to me at the end of the row, I just went full throttle. I just went, "Mama!" Like I'd had my arm blown off. And I got the part. And it was £660 a day. And it was a day rate, and I had 1 day's filming. And they spent so much. I had this prosthetic arm built by the same guy who had just done Frankenstein, Robert De Niro's Frankenstein's prosthetics, and they just spent so much money. And I was flown out to Verona, first class. I'd never flown first class before. Chauffeur drove me onto the set. It was just up into the Dolomites. They filmed it up in the Dolomites, and it was just royalty. And the scene was that after I had my arm blown off, you then cut to me in a stretcher, and Chris O'Donnell, who the hero of the story, there were all these flies swarming around my bloody arm, and Chris O'Donnell took off his helmet and put it over his arm, the arm, to protect it from the flies, and the point of the scene was what a noble chap Chris O'Donnell was. Anyway, so we do this scene, and they decide they're going to do the scene with the flies first. And we get up onto the set, and they've got this box of flies, and we go to film it, and all the flies have died. So they're like, and then we don't know what to do, so the flies aren't there. Everyone had called Richard Attenborough Sir. We don't know what to do, sir. And so they decided they were going to get some more flies. So they said, "We're going to have to book, can you stay another day?" And I was like, "Oh, 660 quid a day. Damn right I can stay another day." So I was taken back to the thing, but then it turned out the man who bred the flies was in England. So they had to get the flies flown over. So the next day, the flies hadn't even arrived from England. Then the 3rd day came, and this time the flies had arrived, but they hadn't hatched. So I was given another day, and it just went on. The 4th day, we finally had the flies ready to go. We shot the thing, and they let the flies out, and the flies didn't swarm around my arm, they all just flew off. And it just went, and this went, so then they had to call England and get another load of flies back. And then the next time, and that took about another 3 or 4 days, and then the next time we did it, they put loads of honey and old meat in my arm to try and get the flies to go around my arm. And even that didn't work, they just flew off. And I ended up being there for 2 weeks on 660 quid a day. And it was just like, I can't believe this is happening. It was amazing how wasteful this Hollywood production was. Anyway, in the end they just said, "Oh, we'll do it in Shepperton." And they built in Shepperton Studios, they built this entire side of the Dolomites. It looked identical to where we were in the Dolomites. God knows how much money they spent on it. They built a cage all the way around this side of the hillside. They shot the scene, and when I eventually went to watch the scene with my dad, it was on. The film was shit. It never got a cinema release. It died on its own. And then eventually, and it was really shame. It was a really good script. It was a really good film. I don't know quite why it didn't work, but anyway, things often don't. But then eventually it was on telly, and I watched it with my dad, and the scene had been cut. And the only thing they kept was me going, "Mama!" So it was like the story of my life. For some reason, the voiceovers worked a lot better than the acting. Anyway, the point of this story is this. So I'm stuck out in Italy for this 2 weeks, and over the time I get really friendly with all the cast and all the people who work on the film set. And the next, they had 2 days filming in Verona, and then we flew back, and they said, "Do you know what, we'll wangle it for you so you could stay for the Verona shoot, because Sandra Bullock's throwing a big party." And I said, "Okay, I'll stay on in Verona." And so I ended up staying on in Verona. Sandra Bullock threw this big party on the last night of filming to thank everyone involved in the Italian production for, and it was just great. And everyone got really pissed, and Sandra Bullock got absolutely rat-arsed. And the DJ, at 12 o'clock, went, "That's it, end of the night, we'll go home now." And Sandra Bullock just started going, "No, I want salsa. I want salsa. I want salsa." And then a couple of nights, she had her little fan, and everyone started going, "We want salsa. We want salsa." And I had this vision in my head. I was a reasonably good-looking young man, and I just knew that nobody else in that room would be able to dance salsa anything like as well as I do. And I just knew what was going to happen is there was going to be a couple of blokes who'd dance and they'd be shit, and I was going to come along and I said, would you like to dance? And I was going to whisk her off her feet, and she was going to fall madly in love with me. And we were going to be the Hollywood glamour couple, Dominic Frisby and Sandra Bullock, front cover of all the Hollywood magazines. I saw it all happening in this few seconds. And I had it all planned, because, you know, when you can dance really well, you know, it does make you, it helps you pull girls. And so it was all there and laid out, and the DJ went, I haven't got any. And I fucked up the story. The whole point of the thing is everything happens for a reason. This is why I've been dancing salsa all these many years. This is why. Owen Meany, everything happens for a reason. And then, yeah, the DJ didn't have any. So there we go. That's the heartbreaking story. Everything doesn't happen for a reason, ladies and gentlemen. It's totally fucking random. Now, I've got to rush off and do another show, ladies and gents, but I'd love you all to come and see my Libertarian love song. So can I just sort of give you some flyers and you just distribute them, take a couple and pass them back? Would that be okay?
We can also do some at the end.
Yeah, we'll have them after the end
fine.
for you,
Okay,
guys.
sure. Thank you very much for listening to my story, and I hand you back to Lee, or do I hand you back to Mark? To Mark. Thank you.